back. So I want to talk to you about axioms, maybe not so much about assumptions, but according to Webster, an axiom is a statement that is taken to be true, but it's to serve as a premise or starting point for further reasoning. And instead of arguments, let's say it's for debate. I don't like to argue with anyone other than my spouse, because I have a tendency to lose that one all the time, and I know where it's going to end up. But hopefully what we're going to talk about is going to cause us to reason together on the overarching discussion points, which are protection for the individual surveyor. I want to introduce, if you're not familiar with this gentleman, Dr. Edmond Locard, French criminologist, was related or at least referred to as the French Sherlock Holmes, of course, Sherlock Holmes being fictional, where this gentleman was a doctor of forensic science. And he came up with the original premise that every contact leaves a trace. Now, I want you to think about that, because no matter where we go, we come in contact with people, places, or things, and we leave something behind or we take something with us. Point of reference, I want to revisit what we spoke of last January. In our discussion last January, I mentioned that I had attended a law enforcement conference, and it was the group of sheriffs and county police chiefs and state police for the states of Maryland and Delaware. They were going through budget cuts. Speaking at the conference was the senior agent in charge of the Maryland-Delaware Federal Bureau of Investigation and a counterpart from the Homeland Security, the training department. And all of the sheriffs and the police chiefs, worried about budget cuts, asked the folks presenting, where are you putting your money? Where are you putting your training dollars? Is it on the target range? Is it on terrorist activity? And to a T, they said, what we train for more than anything else is the pandemic. Now, I want you to think about this. It's a year ago, January of 2020. And they said, we think more about the pandemic than anything else. We train for it. Why? Because the pandemic is a disrespecter of position. It does not care what title you bear or what your job duty is. People get sick. We reviewed last year, a couple of years prior, the threat intelligence, the threat assessment that was presented by the Director of National Intelligence. And there were several subsequent or their predecessors that all spoke of the different threats that face predominantly the United States, but certainly our allies. And they talked about North Korea, and they talked about Iran, and they talked about Syria and Russia and China. But interestingly, at least I found it was interesting, they discussed pandemic flu and its potential impact on global issues like economies and political environments. So here we are. And 1 year later, 12 months later, and we're all faced with COVID-19. Reported infections, 90 million people. Worldwide reported deaths, 1.9 million. These are the reported deaths. Obvious political, economic upheaval. I believe, obviously, for those of you that participate in the political discussion, Donald Trump's presidency was negatively impacted by the ability to blame him for the pandemic and its how it was handled here in the US and possibly worldwide. Misinformation on methods of transmission and mitigation. I will tell you that billions of dollars were spent on disinfectants and sprayers and a variety of application technologies that were totally wrong, because the results of these solutions, the recommended solutions, meant, as my slide shows, the emphasis was on the wrong syllable. And what do I mean by that? While we looked at contact, the reality is the predominant mode of transmission of this particular virus. And although I'm going to be a little centric on the COVID, we're going to talk about some other things that surveyors may be exposed to, most likely are, and we don't want them to ignore that or be unaware of it. Airborne transmission, it's spread through the exposure of virus-containing droplets. And recent studies at Rutgers University have proven, using a nebulizer, that these viral contaminants can stay airborne for extended periods of time and travel even farther than 16 up to 20 feet, and they're still viable. Well, if that's the case, can someone explain to me, why are we standing 6 feet apart? Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And if you're going to be in enclosed environments, you may want to think about how you're protecting yourself. Need to think about what else might be out there. So airborne diseases, and this is from the National Institutes of Health, and I'm just going to refer down to the colorful, discusses viruses, bacteria, endotoxins, and fungi dispersed through the air and can result in infection following inhalation. Obviously, there are also contact diseases. We will talk briefly about MRSA, and the fact that if you do touch an area that has become infected as housing viruses, well, you touch your face, and that's why where everyone's told, wash your hands, don't touch your face. But if the predominant, and I'm talking about in excess of 90% of the infections for the spread of this particular virus as a result of airborne transmission. So this is the problem. This is the issue that we have to address. So what else is out there? Well, I'm sure you know of somebody, if you've not contracted it yourself. If you'd like to know what MRSA looks like under a heavily microscope where it's projected and we can actually see it, it's nasty stuff, and you've seen the results of it. You want to know what the bird flu looks like? H1N1, precursor to COVID-19, another SARS-type virus. HIV. How about swine flu? Strep, down the bottom left. MERS, Middle East respiratory syndrome, and the hantavirus. These are all things that we have to realize are in the air, and although some vaccines are taken care of, and herd mentality is taking care of it, they still exist. And if they exist, would you like to think about this guy? We recognize this, but not to be confused with me. Now, I don't know how they came up with these artist drawings and why they look very similar, but here's what the important thing to know. Up on the top right corner, you'll see a human hair, and its scale is 50 to 180 microns in size. Fine beach sand, a grain of salt. Let's go down to pollen, 15 microns in size. And if you want to follow that scale on down to the bacterium, and 2 below that, you'll see coronavirus, 0.1 to 0.5 microns in size. So I'm always amazed, and I've had the opportunity to observe surveyors or others that are involved in inspection of indoor environs. And of course, we're all walking around with these thin paper masks. Does anybody really believe that that little blue mask is going to protect something as small as the coronavirus or bacteria uh, from penetrating and getting around the mask, which are ill-fitting to begin with, or even into the mucus of the eye, from which you can also contract one of these lovely diseases that we just looked at, or others. So what? Okay. Personally, I think our immune system has been designed magnificently. It's amazing that we're all not dropping dead like flies, but we're not, and there's a reason for it. Our immune system does fight off a lot of infection, a lot of disease, but when you're walking into an indoor environment like you would on a vessel, I think you need to be taking extra precautions, because the people that I see looking for mold or walking onto a vessel and you have that musty smell, and they acknowledge, well, there's obviously mold or something growing here. And what you're smelling is not the growth. What you're smelling is the decayed carcasses of these pathogens, these microbes that have existed, they've died, and now are off-gassing. And that's what you're actually smelling. You see the gray area of mold. It's decayed already, but it has regenerated and is blowing spores into your indoor environment. So if we're not going to take chances, if we want to protect ourselves, one of the first things we want to look at is proper protection before you enter into the interior spaces of a vessel. Now, I want to take a second, and I've discussed this with James. I understand that when you're inspecting a vessel, that you instruct the broker to not start the engines until you arrive so you can see the color of the smoke that comes out of the exhaust. It's an indicator. I would suggest to you that you also instruct the broker, do not open the boat, do not turn on the HVAC system, don't air it out, because if, like Professor Locard, Dr. Locard, if your job is to detect, you should have as pristine of a, for lack of a better word, as pristine of a crime scene as possible, so your detection will be as accurate as possible. Now, again, you're not going to be able to use your olfactory senses and determine what type of mold there is or what type of bacteria might be existent. But before you go into the space, I just encourage you to do away with the wraparound masks. They're ineffective. The spores can still get through if it's not pressed up against your face. We've developed a relationship with Honeywell Corporation, and their entire line of PPE is available to you through us, where you can get a full face mask, or if you don't like the full face mask, half mask with goggles. But in any case, you're going to want to make sure at least your vision and your respiratory system are protected. Now, I would also encourage you to wear full coveralls. They're disposable. They don't cost a lot. And I can tell you that the sum of all of the equipment that you might purchase to protect yourself is far less expensive than the amount of money you're going to lose because you can't go to work because you become infected, either with the virus or black mold, lung infection, or MRSA. It just isn't worth the risk. And I think last year, because we had some fellows that were present in the room with us, the discussion came, well, we can't look like we're afraid of something. We don't want to scare anyone. As a matter of fact, I believe I've been told that some boat yards have actually told surveyors, you may not wear this equipment on our property. I think we're past that now. I don't think you can go anywhere where you're not encouraged to wear a mask or some other type of protection. Remember, if Dr. Locard is correct, and with every contact there's exchange, when you go on that vessel, you're not just leaving something there, you're carrying something off of that boat with you. If you have this attitude of immortality, where you're not going to get infected, I want you to consider the other people you come in contact with, your family, your friends, your coworkers. You get off that vessel, take the coveralls off, take the gloves off, take everything off, put it in a plastic trash bag and dispose of it. Now, you're not going to do that with the mask, but when we get done with our PowerPoint slides here, we're going to go back to video, and I'm going to show you some things that are disposable and renewable and replaceable without having to buy all new equipment. So minimally, make sure the boat is closed before you get there. Don't let them spray aerosols that might mask odors. You want to do the job of a forensic scientist and determine what is on that vessel that could harm the next person that comes on board. I also want to point out, as I mentioned earlier, millions of dollars being sprayed on disinfectants. Disinfectants work when they're wet, and they will in fact kill if they are designed as a viruside, a fungicide, bactericide, mildewstat. They will kill whatever is on the surface while they're wet, provided they are given their adequate dwell time. And each product will have on the SDS, the safety data sheet, or on the label, exactly how long it's supposed to be wet on the surface to do its intended job of killing whatever's there. Be advised, when that product is dry, it no longer kills anything. And the next person in that space, if they are infected, if they're a carrier, asymptomatic or not, that space is reinfected just because of their aerosol. They don't have to sneeze, they don't have to cough. Our breath, if you go out into a cold environment and you breathe, you see the vapor that comes out. Vapor can hold on to those bacteria, can hold on to the viral pathogens. And although the vapor might disappear, those viruses, those microbes are still in the air. And because they're so small, they are not subjected to gravitational pull. Again, they hang in the air. Be careful where you walk in. I just don't go on elevators anymore without wearing proper gear, whether it's a face mask and goggles. You don't know who was in there 10 minutes ago. And trust me, most of the commercial spaces we go into are not filtering out these microbes out of the air. And we'll address that briefly. So protection before detection. Now you're going to walk into the space and you're not going to smell these odors. You're not going to look, what are we going to use? I want to introduce you to, and I'm going to, at the end, we're going to do a live presentation where we'll show how this machine works. This is an air quality index machine. It's a monitor. It's a laser particle counter, and it reads particles down to 0.5 microns in size. You'll see on the screen when we demonstrate it, it will have on the right-hand side particles that are greater than 2.5 microns. On the left side, less than 2.5 microns in size, which is where the nasty bacteria and viruses reside. What I will tell you is, in my opinion, and I think you'll You'll appreciate this as we move forward. If you walk into the space and you begin to test the air quality, you'll have your mask on, your PPE on, you won't be touching anything. The first thing you want to do is test the air quality. You're going to want to take a real hard look at that. And if you're exceeding the limits, the recommended limits of safe air, leave your mask on. Certainly you can open the boat up at that time. If you choose, I would recommend against it. I would recommend before you open the boat up, you go ahead and light off the HVAC, the system, the air conditioning, if they have one on the vessel, because what's going to happen, and I'm sure you've seen the screens that protect the HVAC coils on a vessel. They might filter out dust, maybe mosquitoes, but they're not very good. They're probably somewhere around a MERV 6 or a MERV 4, which is a rate of capture, but they won't capture bacteria and viral pathogens. So you want to make sure that you go ahead and test the HVAC, because if you don't, you could be walking into an environment where the cabin space has been cleared before you got there. But as soon as you turn that HVAC system on, you're blowing pathogens all over everyone and every space, recontaminating the space. Well, how do you deal with that? What can you do to deal with that? Know this: clean air is expensive. Okay, there's dirty air everywhere, but clean air is expensive. So let's clear the air. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of money was spent on application technologies. I think the entire industry of electrostatic sprayers was built around the notion that we have to disinfect surfaces. So here's the difference between a fogger and electrostatic sprayer. Most electrostatic sprayers, commercially available, put out a 40 micron droplet. The 40 micron droplet is sufficient for surface disinfection, calculating that most disinfectants are going to need anywhere from 2 minutes to 10 minutes to disinfect surfaces, depending on the product that you're using. Now, some do an immediate job. Peroxide-based surface disinfectants work immediately, but they're short-lived, but they do work immediately. The problem with peroxide-based is they can harm delicate fabric, so you have to be careful where it's being sprayed. But electrostatic sprayers do a lousy job of clearing the air. For that, we recommend the fogger. The picture on, I'm assuming it's on your left, rather green looking with a tank. It puts out a 15 micron aerosol that is very effective at clearing particulates out of the air. Once we've cleared the air, you can then talk to your client, the prospective boat owner, and you could ask, would you like us to go ahead and fog your HVAC system? Explaining that it's very possible microbes have landed in there and colonized. If they agree that you should do that for their safety as well as yours, well, I think that's something you can charge for. Now, you know, you're not going to do this on a 27-foot cuddy cabin, but on vessels of size, people that want to bring their families down and know that it's protected, I think they will appreciate it. Just be sure to inform them that this is a temporary fix. This will temporarily allow you to be on the vessel without a mask, if you so choose, without eyewear, and go about your task of inspecting the systems that you would normally inspect. So the fogger Definitely, I can see it benefiting the surveyor and protecting the surveyor. Electrostatic sprayers, not so much. You're not there to disinfect anyone's boat. You're there to inspect it, but you want to do it safely. And in order to do that, it is our recommendation that you make sure, if you're spending any amount of time below decks or in cabin areas, that you're working in an environmentally safe space. Something else that you may want to consider. We have been working very closely with Sanders filters, because most filters that, again, that you find on vessels or even in buildings are rated somewhere below MERV 10, which again will filter out dust particles and leaves and birds, but do a lousy job on anything of a submicron nature. ASHRAE is an organization that sort of writes the standard for the heating and air conditioning industry. And they are recommending a MERV 13 minimally to capture submicron particulates like bacteria and virus. Now, the problem with the MERV 13 filters, they are rated to capture 50% of submicron particulates with a single pass of air. Now, depending on the airflow, the amount of air being circulated by the HVAC system, it could take extended period of time to actually clear all of the contaminants out of a space. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. Matter of fact, I'm not comfortable with it. The Sanders Filters product is a MERV 16, and much like the N95 and N99 masks, will filter out 95% with a single pass of air. Now, I know that you run into some vessels that perhaps sailboats are the prime example, where they don't have good ventilation. And so the air handler on the top left there is something you may want to consider using if you have opportunity to put it in there before you ever spend any time. You may want to have it start filtering the air while you do the hull check or above deck activities that you participate in. But in any case, you want to use something that is of significance in terms of trapping particulates, even in your own home. The illustration or the picture on the bottom right is a stage 3 or a 3-stage air filter. The blue fabric is a MERV 6, which again is meant to keep out most dirt, dust particles. The white filter is a MERV 16. And the charcoal filter, which we don't do a lot of, is if there's heavy chemical odor, it will help filter out the odors as you're pushing it through. I will illustrate, I'll actually show you live, but what you're looking at is a frame. The frame is warranted for 10 years. It is gasketed around the entire perimeter. The reason that's important: most of the filters you see in commercial use now or residential have cardboard frames. Cardboard against metal ductwork leaves a significant bypass for air to get around, and air is going to find the path of least resistance. So where you may be using a MERV 13, if it's a cardboard filter, reality is, and this has already been tested and documented, a total gap of 1/4 inch over the entire perimeter. So you may only have a 1/16 of an inch gap, but around the entire perimeter of a filter, for every 1/4 inch gap, it's a drop of 1 in MERV rating. So just think about what's getting around the filter, and that's why the gasketed filter will work. It's superior, forcing all of the air to go through the MERV 16 filtration. Moving on. So we've dealt with the air, we've dealt with the air contamination and the HVAC. I want to talk to you now about building the case. If you are the investigator, if you're the forensic inspector, we find airborne contaminants. They have to be emanating from somewhere. It's quite possible. In your report, you merely want to say, we've detected it. Well, that was nice of you. I'm assuming, like any other deficiency that you might find on a vessel, the owner, prospective owner, may want to know, well, what's the real problem? Where is it coming from? How do we solve it? Working with Michael Pinto, with whom I believe many of you are familiar, we developed a kit that will allow you to take samples from surface areas where you may visually be inspecting and see the results of mold infestation, and you would get a report. And it is a fairly detailed report that not only identifies the type of mold or mildew, but also discusses with it the potential health hazard and remediation recommendations. I believe you owe that to your client. To merely state that there's a problem, that's again nice of you to do that, but perhaps it would be a good idea if you tell them in detail what the problem is, as much as you would if you do oil samples, much as you would if you do hull tapping, moisture meter. There has to be a recommendation of what it's going to take to get it fixed. So the sampling material, there are little strips. I'll show them to you when we go live. You can take samples, you put them in an envelope, send them off to Michael Pinto at Wonder Makers. The laboratory will send you a report detailing. And gentlemen, you can charge for this. If they went to Home Depot or Lowe's and bought one of the little mold kits, which I think sell for somewhere between $15 and $20, it's nice. But if you want a report, well, then it's upwards of $50. And they only tell you what it is. They don't make recommendations on remediation, nor do they tell you the potential health hazard. And again, we don't know who's going on that vessel after you leave, after the deal is done. A gentleman takes his family out and his kids have some friends over. Maybe one of them has a severe mold allergy or other respiratory issue. No one wants to be responsible for that. So it's a good idea and a good practice to say, okay, let's deal with this. Much the same as you would any other serious injury or a serious issue that is on that vessel. We're talking about people, protecting people, not just the vessel. Okay, so we know that there are problems based on our discussion last year and doing some fairly in-depth market research, watching how people work, watching how surveyors operate out of the back of their truck, van, or whatever. You have all the tools necessary. From what I've seen, most have all of the tools necessary, the neat technology, how to determine what's wrong with the boat, all about the boat. Well, let's go all about the people. And I'm going to tell you that we've developed a surveyor's safety kit that will incorporate, if my next slide is correct, here we go, your options. Whether you want a full face mask, a half of a mask, do you want disposable masks for your client to wear in case they came unprepared? Eye protection, the gloves, the coveralls, the Dialos 1700. Now, with the Dialos 1700, be advised, they do have powered plug-in versions. We have gone to the battery powered because of portability. The test kit for testing surfaces so that you can get an accurate depiction of what's going on there. Something else that we've found that we think will be of value to you is something called all clear disc. I'm going to demonstrate them, but knowing that when you find a deficiency, in order for that vessel to become insured and for the potential owner to get his financing, if you find a deficiency, it's my understanding, you're required to go back and determine, did they fix it? The same would be applicable if you are to detect polluted air or polluted surface mold. Well, how do you do that? Do you really want to go back, drive 40 miles? Yes, you can certainly charge for it, but the all clear disc is an indication that the problem was solved, and I'll demonstrate that to you. Your choice of a fogger, electrostatic sprayer, first aid kit should also be incorporated in this to make sure that if you're contaminated or if someone else is showing some signs of distress as a result of being in an enclosed environment where there was, you need to be prepared for that. Pricing on this, because there are options and each surveyor is going to want to pick their own level of protection and their level of sophistication. If you'll contact us, we'll just send you the menu with the pricing, and you just select a la carte what you'd like to have in your safety bag, and that's what we'll be charging you. Summation. Our immune system is designed to do an excellent job of taking care of the majority, but nutrition is a big issue. Our food sources aren't as healthy as they used to be. So I think we need to watch what we eat. I think we need to watch what we ingest in our body and let our immune system function the way it was designed to function. It's tough, and the older I get, the more difficult it becomes to exercise, but take time to make sure you get good cardio exercise. Keep your system functioning. I like to say it's never too late, and I relay the story of my grandmother who at 70 years old started walking 2 miles a day every day, rain or shine. We don't know where she ended up. She was headed west, but that's not the point. The point is that you need to take time to make sure you exercise and keep your body functioning. Stay protected, wear the gear, test the space, don't take the risk because it's going to cost you a lot more than the image you may be portraying. It's going to cost you a lot more than the equipment that you're going to purchase. So with that, Mike, I hope I made up some of your time. I'm going to exit if I press the right button. Yes.
Well done.
Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and start our video again.
You need to stop your share to take that presentation out.
Sharing. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I don't see anybody falling asleep yet. That's great, Bill. I appreciate your. First thing I want to illustrate to you, if I may, is our Dilos machine. And I'm hoping to, please let me know if you can see these numbers. Can everyone read that?
173, I think it says 16154, 143, 133.
Okay, how about on the other side?
Oh, struggling a bit with the light to see that. Higher, 562.
476.
Okay.
Now the higher number is the submicron particulates. It's 2.5 and below. Okay. I'm sitting in some fairly clean air, but according to the manufacturer, anything over 300 would be deemed improper air. Okay. Now what I'm going, and the smaller number would be dust particulates. So we're in a fairly clean environment, and that really should be below 70. But if I were to rub this on my jacket that's been sitting in a closet, you'd see some higher numbers. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to illustrate the Sanders air filter on the intake portion. Bear with me a second. Okay. So I've put the Sanders filter over top, and I don't know if you can see it, but I'll read it for you if you can't see it. The submicron particulates have come down below 100, and the dust particulates are under 70. This is what you would test when you go on the vessel. And if you see high numbers, don't take your mask off, okay? Don't take your mask off. Run the HVAC system. Let this machine do its work. I'll think of the gentleman's name. Was it Ken Bracken, Randy James, that I visited? Bob, Mr. Bracken.
Ray Bracken. Ray Bracken.
Ray Bracken, thank you. Sorry, Ray, I forget my wife's name once in a while. We're standing out in the yard of a boatyard, and the particulates were off the chart. And there, we're standing there outside, out of doors, and yet we're getting some significant readings. Well, what do you think's floating around in that boatyard where there's dust and dirt and mold? It's an accurate indicator, and I encourage you to use it before you take your mask off or spend any time indoors where you're going to be working. If you saw how these filters work, even in my own home, and I have a lovely wife who does an excellent job of housekeeping, which reminds me, a friend of mine on his third wife said that his first two wives were excellent housekeepers. When they got divorced, they kept the house. I'm not sure if that's the same thing, but next, the mask, okay? Full face mask. I'm just going to give you an indication on the interior. Replaceable pads. We replace them with Sanders 150, or you can have 250. If you're working in commercial vessels, I'd recommend the higher rated filter pad. This one will take out 95% of the particulates that are floating in the air. The 250 will take out 99%. Does that mean you're breathing pure air? No. You're breathing contaminated air, but it's capturing the particulates so they're not going up your nose, okay? That's the difference. All air is polluted to some level. Face masks. Anybody using these? Throw them away. They're useless. They'll give you a false sense of security that somehow you're protected. And if you see people wearing them that you care about, let them understand that they don't work. Okay. I want to show you all clear. Okay. All clear can be used. You can offer these to your client. You can offer these to your client and say, I can come back and make sure that they treated your space. Or we can put these around. They come in this size, and they also come in a sticker format. And when they are sprayed with disinfectant, just by way of comparison, they turn blue. So you don't have to go down in the bilge again. All you need to do is see that it turned blue, and you'll know that the area has been treated. Now, quite frankly, you may find some sharp technician that's decided, I will go find these and I'll just spray these and not have to waste my time spraying the entire boat. I don't even want to think about that. I don't want to go there and think that someone is going to be so nefarious as to not treat the space. But if you want to use these for your client, they are available and they'll save you a lot of time traveling back and forth to a vessel to re-inspect. Okay. Finally, the biotape strips. I'm not going to open it. Each one of these, you press down, put it back in the slide, send it off, and you get your report. So if you hear me, unless you have, oh, I did want to show you one other thing. I don't know if you can see this again. This is the gasketed material, a completed filter, double gasket all around, whether it's for your house, office, wherever you're standing. You need to make sure for your own home. Now, you're not going to use this unless it's in a vessel of size. I've only visited vessels that are maybe up to 75 feet, and they have the small screens in the coils. But anywhere else, it's probably a good idea to recommend the filter. By the way, before I get off of here, Mike, Mr. Pepe, raise your hand so I know that you hear me. Okay, no, that's good. I worked with your dad at Mutual of Omaha. But he worked with Ken Brown. He was a gentleman, and always I just appreciated having the opportunity to work with him, even on limited basis. He was a gentleman.
Well, thank you very much. You know, my dad passed away in 2002, but had a long career in the insurance business.
Yes, he did.
Thank you for those kind comments.
You're very welcome. Mike, I'm here for questions if someone has a question. If not, I hope we made up a little bit of time on your schedule.
Spot on, Dennis. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. I find all this quite thought-provoking, really. You know, we are where we are in the world, and it's not a good place, and so on. And just taking care, it's the one thing that I find surveyors sometimes just put to the bottom of the list, and taking care of yourself is just so important. So, you know, I thank you very much for sharing all of that. Does anybody have any questions they want to pop to Dennis?